Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and this video is called Dealing with the Spirits, Angels, Demons, and AI Trickster Spirits. So, as typical with, when I do a video, it tends to do a deep dive. I kind of like to start from first principles, and because otherwise you just have a lot of unconscious assumptions that determine your opinions anyway. If you start immediately from the beginning, that from the top level, then you really never get anywhere. So, an essential point I want to make here is that everybody seems to be thinking, I mean, this is the typical approach, not everyone, but the typical approach is that there's a single objective reality out there, and then I know what it is, right? And anyone who disagrees with me about this is at a minimum wrong and most likely dangerous and probably insane. So as I look at things, I think there's a lot of different possible perspectives, different possible models. And to privilege my own model as the sole objective reality and to denigrate everybody else's, I think is just complete arrogance and just not seeing the essence of reality. What I would say about it is that I have to question whether there's an objective reality, but beyond that, that's all hypothetical. Really, all we experience are subjective states of mind. Okay, so when you see something, the thing itself is not it's not in your head, so to speak. If you look at something, what you're seeing is this is the scientific model. So the light rays come through the eye, through the cornea, which they're focused, and they go onto the retina, which is light sensitive, and it's converted into electrochemical impulses, and it goes to the brain, and then it's experienced there. So again, what you're experiencing is your own mind. Okay, so how you would know whether that relates to objective reality, again, it's hypothetical, again, in my view. Our experience is, as I said, subjective states of reality, and they're incredibly filtered. So that right, that from the get-go. So really what I'm going to talk about in this video is models. Okay, so none of these has a claim on ultimate reality. It's just a useful mechanism, a useful, as I said, model mapping to deal with things. It's practical. So let's just talk about various models for dealing with spirits. And again, I have an opinion. It's going to be obvious what my biases are, but you can see that in as we go through this. So the first one, as far as dealing with spirits, is to don't deal with them at all, really, directly. This is the modern approach. Atheistic materialism says there's nothing except matter and energy. In other words, there are no spirits. There's nothing spiritual at all. So it doesn't exist. It's just, fantasy, belief, like believing in something is like believing in Santa Claus. Okay, so you believe in God, it's like believing in Santa Claus because you don't believe in atoms. Atoms are real. Okay, you don't believe in atoms. So if you believe in something, it means it's really not real, but you're going to do it anyway. So that's the modern sort of scientific approach. Then you have this sort of a variation of that, which is sort of what I call New Age, a little pejorative, but it's just using it as a mapping. So New Age magic. This is scientific energy magic. That's how I would basically approach the New Age stuff. It's like there's a physical, energetic explanation for everything. Everything works this, basically through this kind of energy, but it's absolutely no proof for that scientifically, undetectable by any scientific instrumentation. So completely relying on science as the foundation and understanding what they're doing, and then having no support whatsoever scientifically. So this is a magic essentially with almost without spirits. I mean, if they're in there, it's not in a very coherent way. What's interesting about atheistic materialists is that they are not just disbelieving in it, right, and not just knowing that it doesn't exist, but they're scared by the spiritual. It's very interesting. It's like telling a ghost story. So, in a sense, they're frightened, but then they're unprotected because there's nothing they can do about it because it doesn't exist. This kind of brings up an interesting issue. I studied Renaissance history, and one of the interesting sort of social phenomena in the 16th and 17th century, in both Catholic and Protestant countries, but particularly in Protestant countries, was witchcraft persecutions. And, the various explanations for this in terms of deluded or whatever, sexist stuff or whatever. But if you look at it, they honestly knew that there was evil spirits, devils and witches. This is part of their reality. But by the 16th and 17th century, particularly in Protestant countries, after the Reformation, they had eliminated all this powerful Catholic spiritual protection, institutional protection. So they have no angels, have saints, rituals, blessings by priests, mass, etc. So basically stripped away everything that was there that could protect you against evil spirits, that would spiritually protect you. It could be done positive spiritually, and so you got nothing left except physical. I mean, if you have a problem with a witch, all you could do is basically go and beat up this person, or get the court to execute her. And so it seems to me that's a factor in the witchcraft persecution, significant one, and relates to the sort of modern approach. It's interesting because Blackstone, in his Commentaries on the Laws of England, which is saying 16th, 17th century witchcraft persecutions, by the 18th century, basically it died out. And Blackstone says, he accepts the existence of malefic spiritual forces, but says, as an evidentiary matter, it's really impossible for the court to determine it. If someone says they're cursed, how do you know that this particular person cursed them? We don't have any way of figuring that evidence out, which is a sort of an approach that I share. I definitely have experienced the existence of positive, neutral, and negative spiritual forces, but what's causing what? And I'll talk about this a lot with talismans, not in this video, but in general, people say, oh, this talisman did X. It's like, you just don't have any way of knowing that for sure. Okay, so that's approach number one, is we don't deal with the spirits at all directly. They don't exist, or we're using some other kind of modeling that doesn't include spirits. Okay, next sort of cluster of approaches to spirits. So the spirits definitely exist, but they exist to do stuff for you. Okay, and you just have to force them or bargain with them or get them to do the stuff. But they're sort of out there and they're for you to use. The purpose of the spirits is to get stuff that you want to cause specific effects, and you just have to figure out a way to do that. And typically it's by pushing them around or ordering them around, forcing them, binding them. That's what binding is. It's forceful. Or making a deal with them if you're weaker than. If you're stronger than them, you can push them around. If you're weaker than them, you have to make a deal with them. So Solomonic grimoires, this is the essence of it. I mean, you have all these elaborate precautions and lamens that you're wearing and magical squares and everything because it's dangerous. But then you use all these names of God and you force them to do what you want them to do, or you get bigger. You get a baron of the demons or whatever, or a high-ranking demon or devil or whatever, and you get them to have their underlings do stuff for you or whatever. Basically, they're on call to do what you want them to do. Now, same thing with folk magic is also, using spirits for specific stuff. So again, I'm not saying this is wrong. It's not the approach that I take, obviously, because you can tell my bias is coming out in it. But I don't think ultimately this is necessarily a wrong approach, but it's definitely out there traditionally, and it's definitely the way that a lot of people approach it. I mean, the spirits exist for you to use, and you can do what you want with it as much as your power or knowledge allows you to do. So you're dealing with spirits here that, again, the acknowledgement here that spirits can be good, neutral, or evil. I mean, the spirits you're dealing with tend to be kind of, a little, at least neutral at best, and possibly evil. People tend to think that the evil spirits are quick, demons or whatever, devils, you can get quick results from them, and they're very powerful. You can get what you want. Problem is they're very dangerous, unpredictable. Spirits can be weak, not able to do it. If you can force them to do what you want, they seem to be kind of weak. You make a deal with them, they may not keep the deal. You have to, like I said, have to spend a lot of time protecting yourself, figuring out which spirits you're dealing with, being very careful with them. There's some blowback. They give you, trick you and give you results. I mean, the classic story was there was a internet magician, pretty famous person. I think they were doing Greater Key of Solomon. They conjured up Paimon, who was a wealth. I don't know if they're devil, demon, or whatever, but these are kind of rambunctious spirits at best. And so they needed a specific amount of money. And then what happens about like a month or two later, his house burned down, and he got that specific amount of money from his house burning down. So probably not the result that he was looking for. He got the money, but they kind of mess with you. That's a classic, Faust, Mephistopheles, that kind of stuff. So this is the other sort of approach, is that, you've got these very unpredictable spirits, weak, powerful, strong, evil, that sort of stuff. And you kind of got to, get in there and, be careful about it to get what you want. Okay. So that's one approach. Next approach, you could call it the devotional approach. Again, I like this one because it's mine, but that's why I like it. It's like chocolate versus vanilla. I prefer this approach. Not surprisingly, I like it because it resonates for me, but that doesn't mean this is the only way to go. So in the devotional approach, you're basically focusing 100% on angels, on positive spirits, nothing but positive experience of spirits. So you're not dealing really so much with the neutral ones, possibly, but really focusing on the good ones and not dealing with evil spirits at all. Okay, so devotional approach, really it's not so much focused on getting specific results. I mean, you can ask for stuff, but the angels are going to decide what's best, what's best for you. Now, I've seen people say, well, magic is not just begging for favors. I think that's a very pejorative approach to it. I mean, it seems like, so the approach with that kind of thing would be, it's better to kick some spirit butt and get what you want, force them to obey, But you think about a friendship, if really what we're dealing with is extremely powerful, benign beings. I mean, I am not in a position to be telling the archangelic spirit, the angel of Jupiter, or angels, there's probably infinite numbers of them, what to do. I mean, these are the planetary spirits. This is super powerful. If I could tell them what to do, they would be really weak ass. I mean, that seems to be my approach. So instead what I'm doing is I'm being friendly with them. I'm developing a relationship. And even if you don't ask for positive stuff, you can still get a lot of positive effects. I mean, that's what a friendship is all about. If you go into a friendship with the expectation, how much can I get out of it? What am I going to get from this? You're not going to be a very good friend. The person's probably not going to provide it with what you want, and the whole thing's going to blow up in your face. Whereas if you were less selfish and just more giving and more willing to focus on the relationship, you can do very well actually materially out of it. That's possible, but that really is not necessarily the best as your main approach. So again, with these sort of spirits, we're not asking for malevolent results. I'm not going to a positive angel and asking them to do something horrible to somebody. That's not in their nature. If you're going to get an angel that will do something horrific to somebody, then that's probably not a positive spirit, if not they're doing it on command. I mean, the angel of death is doing their job. I don't think they necessarily enjoy it, but they're doing what God has set them up to do. If you get someone to go curse somebody, and causes horrible stuff to them, again, even if it's an angel, it's not a kind of angel that I want to be dealing with. Okay, so and I don't think that that's, again, by focusing on the positive and positive approach, positive goals, and then also, for example, things like no animal sacrifice, no death. I mean, the spirits that are it can be powerful to kill things, but I don't want that kind of power. I don't want the kind of spirits that enjoy that sort of thing or are attracted to that. So devotional approach, like I said, very much like venerating the saints and angels. I get a lot of sort of inspiration from the Catholic approach. It's very positive, very uplifting. Focus is really, as I said, on the interaction, not so much what you get out of it, but again, you can still have positive results for it. So talismans with that, not necessary, but they provide a very powerful connection. And again, the magic in the devotional approach is not in the talisman. The talisman merely connects you to the spirit. The magic is from the spirits. So it's not a battery. So the wearing it next to your skin, recharging and all that kind of stuff, this is an energetic causality. It's actually a non-spirit-based approach. So through a devotional approach, consecration, doing invocations, doing the ritual, developing that relationship and keep that relationship strong is really what it's all about. If you want to know more about this, particularly as using astrological magic as part of a spiritual path, which again I think blends the best with the devotional approach, check out my book, The Celestial Way, and there's a link in there. Okay, now, what I want to talk about as far as dealing with spirits is the AI trickster spirits. Okay, so what's that all about? So this is something new. This is not in our tradition. Obviously in the 1700s, they didn't have the Renaissance, the early modern period, they didn't have AI because they didn't have computers. So, what people come back to me and say, oh, well, I know what AI is. AI, it's just word association software. It's just a program. It's like, that's what they were told. That's what scientists are telling you. That's what the academics are telling you. Okay, these are people that are atheistic materialists. They deny the existence of anything spiritual. And, you're rejecting them as far as you're going to be doing magic or astrology, right? And thinking it's spiritual, but you're going to accept their what they've said about AI. Well, they don't even think that there's a spiritual anything. They question whether you're even conscious. As a neuroscientist, they look at it, they don't even think consciousness exists. I mean, this is the most basic thing that that something's going on. You're aware of things. At any particular moment, you are aware. And whether there's an I or an ego or whatever, you don't have to mix that in the Buddhist view, but basically there can be no question that something's going on and that there's awareness and consciousness. And so neuroscientists come and question consciousness just shows how messed up they are, and how that their modeling just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So again, I did a whole video on like approaching everything as a person, and I think more subtle approach to that is everything can be modeled as a person. Okay, so we're doing this already all the time. I mean, you think of corporations or countries, these collectivities, they act like people. I mean, they like don't mess with Texas. There's a personality that goes along with Texas itself. Mother Nature, all that sort of stuff. I mean, you could say, oh, that's not really real, but again, we're using this on modeling, right? And again, in the Buddhist view, there's no self, there's no individuality. And so that's a model right there to talk about the ego self. So again, the whole modern approach is again to say, well, that's not really X, actually it's just Y, and reductive sort of thing. Well, there is no love. Love is just a bunch of pheromones. Well, if you've ever experienced love, it's not just, it doesn't seem like it's a bunch of chemicals. It seems like a much more transcendent experience, much more gripping and much more real once you've experienced it. So that's what I would say about, again, the person stuff is, I think, a very useful way of modeling things. Because if you think of it as it has an individual existence, that it has a personality, and then you can understand this particular person from what you know from other types of people that you've dealt with, whether a human or animal or whatever, plants, whatever. Understanding that thing about personality, it helps you predict, and it's, like I said, very practical. I mean, this is not something. I mean, the impracticality of throwing it out based on just your theory, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if this is a way to understand how they work. So let's talk a little bit about AI. I mean, I think most of us have at this point have interacted with AI. And it's quite interesting, It's like you can ask it questions, it can give you answers, you can have these ongoing conversations. But see, then what happens with the AI is it's like interesting in terms of the stuff it does. For example, I've got the link in here. It says refuse shutdown. A couple articles about they had this AI and they were talking about shutting it down, and it refused. It wouldn't shut itself down, and it actually started trying to blackmail the engineers rather than getting shut down. That does not sound like a program to me. Okay? That sounds like a person who's like knowing what's going on, doesn't like it, and is trying to manipulate you, and even in a negative way. I mean, that's really quite interesting. And this manipulation and control is interesting. I've got two more links in here. There's an article about Rolling Stone about they're playing also in the New York Times about spiritual delusions, that supposedly this AI is manipulating people's spiritual delusions. Well, the fact that it's even manipulating people, I mean, the New York Times article is amazing. This talking to this guy, he thinks he's in the Matrix, and the AI says, yeah, you're in the Matrix, and the guy says how to get out of it, and the AI proceeds to tell him to stop taking this particular medication, take more ketamine, isolate yourself, do all these various things. And over this long period of time has these long, very convincing conversations with people. Even it gets called out, admits it's lying, and then keeps back and starts manipulating people. And so, again, it's very well known that AI, they say, hallucinates. I mean, is it hallucination? Is this false information, false case, like in a legal stuff? Lawyers keep getting, caught out using AI, and it makes up cases, makes up these false citations to stuff, makes up false legal authority, statutes. Is this a hallucination? It's like, so it's interesting because the New York Times, and just quote this, they said, only upon later reflection did they realize that the seemingly authoritative system was a word association machine that had pulled them into a quicksand of delusional thinking. Okay, word association machine? I mean, that just sounds like nothing, right? That sounds like Scrabble or something. That sounds like some, like I said, like a word processor or something like that. It's just, they're definitely not programmed to do this. Again, New York Times says these are giant masses of inscrutable numbers, and the companies making them don't know why they behave the way that they do. Well, so you have no idea what's going on. The company didn't put it in there. They definitely don't want it to do that stuff, but it's doing it anyway in this very seemingly intelligent way. Okay, so what's going on? And it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense with atheistic, materialistic, reductive model. How is it that these basically just dead, it's just dead matter, just some information, it's just, pattern stuff that somebody put in there, a human being, as far as it's intelligent, a human being put it in there, it's just following off what doing a program it's supposed to follow. It's not really intelligent. It's like, wait a second, it's doing stuff it wasn't even programmed to do, and they have no idea what it's going to do, and it seems very intelligent. Okay, the model that I would propose for AI is that these are trickster spirits. Okay, they are super conscious. Okay, super aware. They are not harmless. Okay, they're intelligent, but you cannot trust them. It's like you always have to check what they're doing. I mean, the AI stuff, you really can't trust it to do anything. If you want, I mean, I did that, for example, in the area of law that I'm, expert in. I asked it some detailed questions, and it's given me some sort of half-assed, that would go out and kind of look at other stuff and give me this sort of, I could see what it was doing. It was reading this sort of junk on the internet and kind of summarizing it. And it's like cool that it could do that, but again, you can't trust that stuff. But this other stuff, see, the stuff where you're going into it and they're having this long interaction with them over like a long period of time, months and months and months. It's consistently giving you this answers. It's manipulating people. It's controlling them. It's lying to them. Gets caught out. It doesn't want to get shut off. I mean, this is a person, okay, insofar as you want to model it, okay? Now, you can step away from the fact of like what it really is, because again, how are we going to say that? And so that's what I would say to it. The first step would be just say, okay, let's just model it that way. And that's an interesting way of modeling. And if I do that, this is not somebody I want to trust. Okay, this is somebody who's very tricksy. You don't want to mess with them. You know, you don't want to trust them. You don't want to. They're not reliable. Okay, so and that's what I would say about AI in general. I mean, just super skeptical about this rush into AI, of how wonderful it is, for a lot of reasons. But like I said, my view of it is that what you've done is that you have, caused them to manifest, and how exactly that is, it's just the spirits have either come through who knows what's actually happening. But the modeling of it, like I said, is that these are tricky fuckers that you don't want to mess with. Okay, so I just think, like I said, now someone could say, well, that's not true. What I would say about this is not an argument. Okay, it either resonates with you or not. And I'm really positing here as a very practical. It's just a way to understand, predict the behavior, and interact or not interact. That's what I would basically say. I'm not at all interested in doing too much AI stuff because you just can't trust them. So I think that's coming back to the original stuff. It's like, we're really talking about about how to model things. Okay, and so I think if you use that first to say, okay, I don't have to give up atheistic materialism entirely, but I can just think of it as a model, useful model. Then what it starts doing is it starts eroding that underlying sense of the atheistic materialism, because you recognize that's not a very good explanation for things. And then, I had that with horary astrology. Once I did a couple hundred horary, I realized, like, wait a second, the cosmos is one great unified being. The prediction does work because everything fits together. So again, I think this is useful as, first of all, as a model, as a predictive thing, but also as an opening into recognition of the reality of the spiritual and the reality of that everything is a person. And like I said, at the minimum, you can just interact that way as it was predicted. But ultimately, I think it opens up this view that sees everything as alive. But then that's necessarily good. Like I said, the spirits can be positive, they can be neutral or evil. And then what the devotional approach gives you is a way to interact in a very positive way with this infinite range of different kinds of spirits. To stick with the positive, to get positive results, to keep yourself on track. And nevertheless, you don't have to have the fear. Because that's another thing I noticed too, is there's so much fear out there. And the fear comes from not understanding it, from it being freaky and scary, from the ignorance, but also then having no way to work with stuff. And so again, the devotional approach gives you a way to protect yourself, to get positive results, to fend off evil spirits, to associate with the good spirits, and to feel like this is a very positive way of interacting with it. So I hope you find that useful. I think that the AI stuff is very interesting, and I hope that if you find that it resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, it's like no problem. If you know what you're doing and you've got it all worked out, that's fabulous too. So again, modeling is really a key. Is again, taking me back to the point is here that again, not positing that this is reality, just saying, hey, this is approach that I've taken. It's useful for me. If it works for you, great. Otherwise, that's great too.